What's up, fuckers? It's your boy Jack Slack, back with the shit back, having had a lack of luck. Well, I hurt my back. That's the summary of what I was trying to say. So yeah, no preview last week. Got some articles done, but didn't get a pre-fight podcast. But event was good. I think we can all agree on that. So maybe I should not do things more often. No, it was a good card looking down it before the fights, and I think most of them lived up to expectations. There was a bit of disappointment in the co-main event. Oh no, sorry, co-main event. Jermaine Durandamy versus Amanda Nunes. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. And I was thinking this, like, you know, when the fight was coming up. I can't remember the last time that we booked 3 title fights on the same card. It might have been UFC 217 or whatever it was, the time when GSP fought Bisping, TJ Dillashaw fought Cody Garbrandt, and Rose Namajunas fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk. They could have done one since then, but that's the one I remember. And I remember that because it was an amazing event with 3 amazing finishes in those title fights. But then I remembered any time you book 3 title fights, you could end up with, well, I mean, it's pretty difficult if you're trying to organize an event and you've got complete malleability in the time scale. You could end up with 3 first-round finishes and a ton of time to fill, or you could end up with 3 25-minute slogs. And this one, because the GSP Bisping card, that was 3 quick finishes, you know, first, second round. This one was literally every fight went to the 5th and final round. You know, the stoppage in the main event was in the 5th round, but the other 2 went the distance. But I still enjoyed all of them. You know, that was the thing. I found these fights going really quickly. So we'll go from top to bottom, because I know that's what you want to hear. Well, what have I got in my notes here? I started with Holloway versus Vulcan Optic, because obviously that was my favourite going in. But we'll talk about Usman versus Covington first. I think mainly the thing was, you can think about these things all day about how the wrestling match is up, but if neither of them attempt a takedown, then you're like, oh, well, that was a massive waste of time thinking about that. But, I mean, fair play to him, because they came out and put on a banger. And fair play to Covington, because, you know, he talked a lot of smack, but he does always bring it. You know, it's very easy to dislike his media persona. And the thing is, like, he was kind of getting away from it this week too. You're going into the biggest fight of your life. Why are you now backtracking on the media persona? Especially as it's worked so well, you know, the MAGA stuff. I did notice a lot of USA chants throughout this fight, and you're like, I don't think anyone who knows who these people are, or you know, well, I don't think anyone who doesn't know who they are would come to the event. It's not exactly you know, it's not exactly the biggest star power card ever. But if you know who Kamaru Usman is, you know that he's not actually Nigerian, right? Well, I mean, he's ethnically Nigerian, but he's an American citizen and has been for like most of his life. But anyway, yes. So Colby decided to get away from that this week, and everyone was sort of like, oh, you are subtly backtracking for if you lose. But no, he lost and he doubled down. He was like, should have been stopped, blah, blah, blah. But I thought this was a really fun, solid fight. Because when I was coming into this, I wrote a piece for Unibet and I was saying, like, you know, we'll have to see one guy do something that he doesn't normally do, because if one guy gets his wrestling working, the other one, by definition, won't be able to. You know, Usman loves to draw people into the clinch and smother them. Covington likes to keep a high pace. Can't keep a high pace if you're being smothered. Can't smother the other guy if he's effectively keeping a high pace. So, I thought it was really going to be a clash of heads there, and then they both just did something we didn't expect them to. So, pretty bloody great. But in terms of the striking, I thought Usman looked better than I've seen him in quite a while, actually. Well, ever, to be honest. It was the case of Southpaw versus Orthodox, and the rear hands were landing as counters and leads, and they were both cracking each other a lot. In fact, it was just the thing that showed you the difficulty with the Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup. If you're not especially defensively tight, it's all governed by where your rear hand is, and you're also trying to throw your rear hand the entire time. So you're living on a knife edge, basically. Usman was landing some good counter right hands early, but then it sort of like midway through the first round, Covington started just sort of biting down his mouthpiece and started throwing the combinations anyway, you know, 3, 4, 5 punches and a high kick or something like that. And that started to work, like keeping Usman's head down and trying to overwhelm him in combination worked well. What I like from Covington that he does a lot is use high kicks. He doesn't like throw him up just flicky shit for no reason. He does actually throw them like he wants to hit the guy. But that really works well in his wrestling. He does a lot of high kicks into level changes to get the takedown. Hits those all the time. Did him to Rafael dos Anjos, did him to Robbie Lawler. But here he was using the high kick and then coming with the lead hand uppercut afterwards, and he was jacking Usman's head back with that. And that really does hammer home how good this guy's conditioning is, because it's one thing to throw 100 punches around like they do, but he's throwing high kicks all the time too. So pretty mad that he can do that. There was a moment in the first round where it looked like Usman had hurt his hand or something like that because he switched to southpaw and he just starts throwing right jabs constantly in answer to everything Covington did. But then he switched back. And then the real difference maker that I noticed through this fight was the right uppercut to the body from Usman, which is it's a long, awkward punch, but you'll have seen it in Arnold Allen versus Gilbert Melendez, or basically anyone Arnold Allen fights who's an orthodox fighter. You'll have seen Floyd Mayweather did it to Maidana in their second fight. He was doing it off the shoulder roll and coming back with the right uppercut to the solar plexus. It's a gorgeous punch. It's kind of loopy. It looks like you should know better than to throw it. You look at it and you go, I can't imagine a good boxer would actually throw that, but they do, and it works really well. And he was hitting it off the collar tie. He was hitting it in combinations and things out in the open. It was just working really well, and it seemed to slow Covington down over the rounds a bit. Certainly calmed him down, and that's what Mayweather used it against Maidana for. The guy was all in his face throughout the first fight, so he just used it to go, sit down, slow down a little bit, just dig it into the body, make him think about running in. There was a sort of full slow blow that wasn't at one point. There was some eye gouges. It all got very messy, but that's what we wanted. We wanted a blow off to this feud, and it actually lived up to it. Massive respect to both men. You could have, I was expecting either one guy to get ahead in the wrestling and do their normal shit, or I was expecting a shitty kickboxing match. And we did, in a sense, get a shitty kickboxing match, but I expected, tentative, awkward kickboxing. We got two guys trying to take each other's heads off, and I thought that was terrific. I think we'll do the where do we go next talk. I think for either of these guys, Masvidal works because he's got the name power at the moment. I mean, there's talk of them trying to do the McGregor-Masvidal fight if McGregor wins his fight with Cowboy in January. Worst poster of all time, by the way. But, with Masvidal, he's had a bit of a break with the Nate Diaz fight because, as much as Nate Diaz was ranked at number 5 at welterweight, he's not a top welterweight. Whereas Masvidal seems to be moving to a point in his career where he just keeps getting better. He's got everything on point. Looks like he's ready to move into sort of title contention. So put him in with Covington to have the blow off to the feud. That's your nice crossover between money fight and relevant, for the title picture. Or you put him in against Usman because why not? I think they got him at third in the rankings on the UFC's official rankings. You got Woodley and Covington above him. Leon Edwards just below him. Rafael dos Anjos is still top 5 somehow. Yeah, that division's good, but it's also still got a lot that needs to work itself out. They've got these guys who put together streaks and things, but they never really beat, once they get into the cream of the crop, they have a stumble like Vicente Luque. You got Stephen Thompson, who's, still great, but not going to get a title shot because he had a couple of losses in there that are hard to work your way around. And you got Tyron Woodley, who's just sort of sitting on the sidelines doing nothing. Hell, do the rematch if you really want. If you want Masvidal if McGregor wins, I'd say don't announce anything till January, and you find out whether McGregor wins or loses. If he loses, stick him in with Diaz. No one cares. Move on with the welterweight title picture. If he wins, put him in with Jorge Masvidal. Have the rematch between Usman and Covington. Everyone's would anyone complain if there was a rematch of this? Yes, it was incredibly grating, all the talk and banter. Neither of them came across as very likable, but the fight was terrific. Right, let's move on. What are we doing? Volkanovski versus Holloway. You knew that I'd rave about this one. Like I said, I tweaked my back this week. It's getting better. Thanks for everyone for the well wishes and things. I'm back in, walking, doing stuff, making sure it's moving, but not in explosive ways. So I didn't get the podcast out, but I did manage to get something out for the Patreon boys, just looking at Volkanovski and his outfighting game, which, has surprised me in his last, 3 matches now, but the 2 before this, because he was a guy who put people against the fence, cage wrestled and beat them up there. Meets Chad Mendes and Jose Aldo, and I think they would have, had he stuck to that game plan and just been the cage wrestler, the big strong guy, the unit, I think they would have given him problems. But he showed that he had more than that, and he beat him up at range. Well, not necessarily beat up in Aldo's case, but he certainly outpointed him at range very nicely. And one of the things it's the jab, which works really well, surprising given his stocky build. Though he did have a couple of inches on Holloway in reach, even though he gave up like 4 inches in height because Holloway's got a weird T-Rex reach for his frame. But as we've talked about before, height and reach are they combine to make range. If you're punching up at someone, you lose some of your reach. If you're punching down at someone, to a degree, if you're punching down at someone, you also lose some of your reach. If they're level with your shoulder, that's perfect. But in that piece, I was just showing some of the stuff that Volkanovski does on the outside, and it's really slick. And one of the things that really, stood out to me and will have stood out to you in this fight, I'm sure, constant use of the inside low kick. And just the other week, someone wrote in saying, did you see Mir versus Roy Nelson 2? And I went, yes, sadly I did. But Mir was using the inside low kick from a southpaw stance to knock Nelson's leg out as he stepped in to swing. Now, and we were saying, like, that's gone out of vogue. The low kick is where it's at for everyone. But now you've got the UFC featherweight champion has built his last 3 fights on that inside low kick, and the UFC women's strawweight champion also just constant. I mean, not so much against Andrade because Andrade just ran in with her chin up, but every other fight she's had has been inside low kick building into things all the way. In fact, her inside low kick doesn't often build into things. It's just sort of a point scorer. And then when she misses, she steps up into the sidekick. But we looked at that in a different Patreon Boys study called Willie Zhang and the Sander sidekick. But yeah, so he came out, and that was what he did in this fight. Didn't jab as much, was using the inside low kick beautifully, but also using the calf kick. And I think that's what and I said this in the study, the calf kick and the inside low kick, I don't think people should be treating one as if it's much better than the other. I can see the appeal of the calf kick because it is, you've seen guys go down from it. It can shut the leg down in a way that the calf kicks take a long time in the way that the thigh kicks take a long time to do. And it's a lovely long-range weapon in these longer stances that are used in MMA. You can attack it from way out of distance. So it's sort of like a one-shot thing. But it is harder to get in with combinations afterwards. If you watch someone like Jeremy Stevens, he's got that calf kick, but he can't really follow up on it. Whereas the inside low kick is just built for following up on. Dan Henderson was using it when he could barely move, and he was still able to get in on guys who were running backwards twice as fast as he could move going forwards. But because he picked their leg up by kicking it, he could get in. So some lovely inside low kick work, but Volkanovski was also using the calf kick, and even though I said it's harder to get in off, he was doing a wonderful job throwing the calf kick, getting his leg back down behind him, winding his hips and jumping in with that Kovalev style lead straight rather than the jab. You turn your hips in and then you come back and you put some stank on it. The reason I say Kovalev is because Kovalev knocked down an awful lot of people with what all the commentators were like, that was a jab, but you're watching him square his hips and then come back with it. Max was finding the right straight to the body in the early going, which was interesting because obviously Volkanovski fights a bit more square a lot of the time. If you watched him, there was some interesting comparisons to Shi Jinliang, whose name I just said terribly. Shi as in Qiu, Jian Liang. He is a Chinese kickboxer. I wrote something for him about him on either Vice or Fightland a little while ago, but he is quite, he fights quite square, and then he does these little sidestep and then weave back in the other direction, and then sidestep and weave back in the other direction. And Volkanovski was doing some of that. You could hear the corner say, turn him, turn him. That's one of the wonderful things, like, you notice in both kickboxing and grappling, certainly more in grappling nowadays, but it's something I talked about in Finding the Art, Cutting Angles, or Taking Angles. Can't remember what it's called, but it's on the Patreon. Go have a read or look at it or listen to it or whatever. But we talked about turning people, and in boxing, turning people is to get them off one. If you're on one leg turning, you can't hit with power, and you're also having to re-establish your defense to prevent someone taking an angle on you. But the wonderful thing about it in kickboxing is if you step out to the side of someone, if they've been waiting for you to kick to step down the center of the right straight, or if they're checking your kicks, when you turn them, it's almost like you're going around their house, opening windows and opening doors and stuff, and they're running around their house trying to close doors and close windows after you. And you're going to get to one that you've already opened at some point that they just forget about. So that's what keep turning people, and their defense will open up just through merit of them being constantly forced to move. And in a grappling sense, one of the common places you see it nowadays is seated guard. The Danaher lads love trying to step around people when they're sat in the guard on the floor. But yeah, lots of side-to-side movement from Volkanovski in that one. Lovely stuff. We talked about it before the fight. I was saying Max Holloway's footwork is a large part of why he's been so difficult to take down. But where Frankie Edgar was stuck out in the open and having to reach for him, Volkanovski might be able to get him close to the fence. You did see in the first round, and I think later in like the third, Volkanovski hits a post single, which is, slam your hand into their shoulder, pick up the leg, and he runs him onto the fence. But he's close enough to do it. Like, he's close enough to hit the fence almost immediately. So he worked him into position to do that. He noticed that he'd got him along the fence, and he pushed him to it. Max, brilliant. No trouble at all, breaks off the fence, breaks free of the clinch. Lovely stuff, given that, so many other guys couldn't do that, including Jose Aldo against Volkanovski. And Volkanovski did this a couple of times through the fight. Max didn't care. He was like, I'm not going to get stuck on the fence. And, even though Max lost this one, boy, does it make me more interested in that Max Holloway Khabib Nurmagomedov fight that never happened. Because Max Holloway is first great with his footwork and able to stay off the fence. Second, good at getting up. And third, very difficult to take down even if you get him on the fence. He was there just whipping his leg away, breaking free of clinches, always coming out with an elbow most of the time. So, yeah. What can I say? Max would have done him. But as he moved on to the second and third round, Volkanovski's able to build more combinations off his inside low kick and so on. The inside low kick, especially when he uses it, one of the wonderful things is if you can get your left leg, after you've kicked, down to like next to your right leg and put your right leg back behind you, you can start countering off that. And there were lots of opportunities where Volkanovski countered with overhands and things coming down from the inside low kick. He also did it off the calf kick with his right leg. He'd come back into the left hook. Worked wonderfully. And about midway through the second round, Max switches stances to southpaw, and he fights a lot of the fight in southpaw from then on. A lot of the time, he's fought whole fights southpaw, like against Cub Swanson. He did most of that fight southpaw, but most of the time, it's sort of a thing that he just switches to for bits and pieces. So he started doing his usual thing where he throws the side kick, and then he steps in like he's going to side kick, but like jumps down the side of the opponent's guard and throws the left straight. What I really liked from Volkanovski was his shifting right hook. Because he steps in and guys expect him to square up and leap for the left hook and fall short, but he instead steps in, squares his shoulders, feints, and then he steps through with his right foot again and hits him with his shifting right hook. Amazing for ring cutting, but he's making great distance with it too. The D side worked well for Holloway. The few times he threw it, the defensive side kick just jammed Volkanovski getting in, because obviously as great as Volkanovski is at using multiple methods to close the distance as a shorter, stockier fighter, he still needs to close that distance, and if you can jam him with the sidekick, that worked well for Holloway a few times. In the fourth round, Volkanovski started to use his own jab, a lot more than he had previously, and that was when Max sort of started to get back into the fight. It was like Volkanovski's now comfortable stepping in and trying to box without the kicks as much, and Holloway started to find his own counters. And he also, that coincided with Holloway returning to orthodox stance, presumably because the kicks let up for a second. But you heard Daniel Cormier saying it throughout the fight, he's doing so much better from orthodox, but he's taken such a pounding in that lead leg. There was a moment in the fifth round where Volkanovski stepped in so deep that Max almost snapped him down under his armpit and tried to get a guillotine. I wonder, if you go into a rematch, I think that's something that Max should be looking for. Look at Brian Ortega's performances. Go train with Brian Ortega. They clearly get along. Because I think if you've got a guy who you've got a couple of inches, if you're not winning with your length and range, but you've still got height advantage, you can use that height advantage in other ways. So either double collar tie in the clinch, try and knee him in the head, or you can try and snap him down and get the guillotine, or just use the front headlock generally. But yes, absolutely marvellous performance from Volkanovski. I was singing his praises from back when he fought Hirota in his second UFC fight. But, it's one thing there are people that you see coming up and you go, oh, yeah, I reckon he's got potential. And then with a belt, you're like, yeah, I saw that. But Volkanovski in his last three now, has shown stuff that I didn't even see in his earlier fights. So, and I didn't, I don't know if he would have got to the title just on the stuff he was showing against Hirota and so on. Marvellous work from him. Another fantastic showing for City Kickboxing. And not a bad showing for Max. He's got a huge fan base for a reason. It's not just that he's entertaining and keeps an incredible pace. It's that he's tough as nails. He was a bit upset about the decision, but I don't think there is much to be upset about here. He was consistently outlanded. He was falling behind badly on the strike stats. And, I can understand the Poirier one, because that was portrayed as like a one-sided beating. But if you score round by round, he was pulling it back. But this one, no, it wasn't happening. Talk of a rematch, wouldn't mind, because, Holloway has been not long reigning, but he beat everyone in the division on the way to the featherweight belt and then defended the featherweight belt a couple of times. But you've got a lot of stuff going on in that division as well. You got Ortega, who's still in the top, one of the top spots, but not really around. The UFC is still ranking Aldo, even though he's just gone down to bantamweight and had decent success there, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Zabit is like the next one down, but I think it might be time to bounce him into a title shot, but there seems to be some tentativeness from his team around him, because even though they put out that statement being like, it's a conscious decision to gas, everyone was aware of him gassing against Cater in the last round. And that's like his third fight in the UFC where he's very clearly run out of steam in the third round. Chansung Jong, well, maybe there isn't as much going on in that division as I thought there was. You've got Cater and Burgos, but they're quite far down even. Emmett's doing well. Chansung Jung and Frankie Edgar are fighting this weekend, so yeah. I don't think you can go wrong in that division. I think there's a lot of interesting people he could fight, but if they did the rematch, that would be no harm either. Right. Getting bogged down, so we'll try and do a little bit quicker for some of these, because I was just jizzing all over the performance. Well, firstly, the fight from Usman and Covington, and then the performance from Vulcan Optic. Nunes versus Jermaine Durandamy. I've got a lot more respect for Jermaine Durandamy now. We all remember the sort of like Cyborg stuff where she basically gave up her title so that she didn't fight Cyborg. And there was talk of it being like a hand injury, a lot of talk of her being ducking Cyborg. And then she fought Holly Holm and clocked her after the bell like 4 times. But I thought she gave a brilliant account of herself here, because she clearly was on the losing end of the skills on the ground. But when she was on the feet, she was going after it, and she was getting in Nunes' face. And there was a reason Nunes was taking her down every time, because like Nunes started the first round low kicking and throwing her 1-2s and her big overhand, the standard Nunes performance. But as soon as Jermaine Durandamy started timing the low kicks with the right straights up the center and walking her down, she was actually getting cracked, and she was like, "No, I don't like this." So she took I don't want to say the easy way out, but when you got an opponent with such an obvious flaw, you just go to it. So she did that, and basically that was every round. Jermaine Durandamy would try and walk forward, put a pace on her, but didn't have the skills to stop the takedown. Did decently from her back. She was mainly holding and trying to get stand-ups and things, but threatened a couple of triangles, even swept her with a triangle at one point. And also landed a good up kick, like right on the chin, which props to Nunes for taking. So let's talk about the other interesting stuff on this card now we've done the big 3. What did I like? Kai Kara France versus Brandon Moreno was good fun. If you haven't seen that, it was a banger. The ones everyone wants to hear about, I'm sure, are the bantamweights versus old men. You got Petr Yan versus Urijah Faber and Jose Aldo versus Marlon Moraes. Yan versus Faber, I thought Faber gave a good account of himself, but was thoroughly outmatched. Yan, always moving forward, always putting on the pressure. Always cautious with his pressure, which is what I love. They were all talking about what a big hitter he is the whole time, but the thing is that he throws like 3 or 4 punches at a time. He does it a lot, and he doesn't open himself up too much doing it. He makes the other guy's life very hard. He falls into clinches. I was working on a Filthy Casuals guide for him, but then I sort of lost track of time, so that didn't come out. But it does some nice stuff where he throws his right hand and shifts into clinches. Does great work with the single collar tie and uppercuts. And if you watched his clinch breaks in this fight, that was where he was doing a lot of his damage. Because he trains in Tiger Muay Thai and he does a lot of like trips and things. You'll notice he'll like push one hand down as if he's about to arm drag it, and then he'll kick in sort of a sweepy way the opponent's leg, basically just feinting that he's going to try and turn him and sweep him, like Matt Brown did against Ben Saunders several times. And then he comes out of the clinch with an elbow or a high kick or whatever, and the high kick was the one that knocked him out. But he did a few of those, did a lovely elbow in the second round coming out of the clinch. Faber was just Faber, he was just trying to land overhands on the counter and the odd check left hook. Did the overhand into stepping lead knee that he occasionally does, caught Edgar with that, and he caught Yan with it too. But you saw, it was the thing that we expected. Yan's feints just threw him for a loop. He was basically like against Edgar too. If you show Urijah Faber feints, he's going to try and swing. He's going to feel bad about missing those swings, and he's going to stop swinging, and he's going to start sitting back and wait a bit longer, and then you can hit him in the face. He did get hit in the face quite a lot in this fight, and then there was an awkward moment in, was that the second round, where Petr Yan sort of like smiles and laughs at him after a punch, because Yan was doing a great job of being right on the end of Faber's reach and just sort of like going back with the punches. And then Faber immediately started to smile and laugh back and got popped in the face with a right straight. And Yan has a great straight. Sent him right on his arse. I mean, good for Faber. He's tough as nails, especially at 40-something years old. But, I think we all knew Yan was going to win this one coming in. The one that was a bit of a surprise was Jose Aldo versus Marlon Moraes, because Jose Aldo did a great job of beating Moraes up. Moraes came out with the immediate switch high kick, which he did against Jimmy Rivera and a couple of others in the UFC. Try and knock their head off early. Did it 3 times, and I think he clipped Aldo on all of them. And obviously Joe was going, oh, he's hurt. And then Aldo pulled it back, and it's weird. If you're training for Aldo, you have to... Actually, this brings us back to something I was going to say about the Volkanovski versus Holloway fight. If you're training for Aldo, you're training for the low kicks, but they're also something that he's barely shown for about a decade. So, very strange situation. But Holloway's answer was to have his lead leg pointed sort of out, the knee pointing out into the kick, and to wait and throw the right hand as soon as Aldo kicked. And that's because Aldo almost always uses that one outside low kick. I think I heard Volkanovski's corner talking about where his knee was pointing in this fight, but if you noticed, because Max is waiting on the low kick and trying to punch down the center instead of checking kicks, Volkanovski was able to go inside and out, because you're always going to have your knee favoring one kick, going into one kick. So if you start putting your knee out so that you can step in on the outside low kick, the inside low kick is going to lift your leg up and knock it out, and vice versa, if you point it in to take the inside low kick. So Aldo, not low kicking much in this fight, but was boxing lots. He's been obsessed with his boxing for years, was talking about going to boxing, and he was looking fantastic. He was throwing combinations, counter combinations, did a beautiful one in the second round where he slipped inside a jab, right straight to the body, left hook to the body, pulled back. Moraes was obviously winded and then tried to come back at him, and Aldo countered with like another 3-punch combination. I thought his hands looked splendid here, because Marlon Moraes, if you watch him in his WSOF days, he was very basic. It was the low kicks and big swings, and he's really tightened it up, got better all round. Lovely boxing, really surprisingly lovely boxing. And then he gets in with Aldo, and he just looks outclassed for a lot of it in the boxing. It was lovely. And then Aldo hits him with a couple of right straights on the point of the chin to end the first round. And that reminded me of the Cejudo fight. And Cejudo got there by just being hard as nails. That fight was so good, because Cejudo was losing in the first round. He was getting badly outclassed, and I think in the second round too. And then the ref, his corner goes, just get in there and fuck him up. You need to go at him. And Cejudo just goes at him, and he's throwing right-hand leads, like no setup at all. But because Moraes is quite square, you can sort of get to his center line if he doesn't slip it. And the right straight worked on him wonderfully. And then Aldo did the same thing, right straight down the center, caught him right on the chin, sent him backwards. And Moraes ducked in. Aldo tried to shake him off, because we've seen Aldo just ragdoll dudes off like Edgar, just by the wizard, just threw him around. But Moraes did a great job sticking to him, following him around, and then picking him up and slamming him. And then Joe Rogan, because Moraes was hurt and held like a smart fighter would do, and there were like 5 seconds in the round while he was just holding side control from the top, Joe Rogan was like, oh, he didn't hit him from side control. He's clearly gassed. You're going, what? But second round, Aldo was walking him down, hitting body shots. Lovely stuff. And then third round, Moraes starts to come back. Beautiful triple jab. Pep step, which is where you leave your orthodox stance, circle round, skipping to your left with your legs almost level, and then you come back in a southpaw stance, hit him with the left straight. Lovely stuff. Moraes got the decision. I think it's because he had so much success in the very early part of the first round, and then he had success in the third round. But because the middle portion of the fight was all Aldo, it seemed like, it'd be very easy to forget about that rough start for him and then just go, oh, well, all Moraes really did was come back at the end of the third round. So I think it really hinges on how you score that first round. Not too mad. I thought Aldo looked great, even though, there was a lot of talk after this, like, well, clearly people were just being scaremongering with the weight cut. But no, you can look at his weight cut and go, fucking hell, he looks weird. He's very gaunt. The fact that he did well and rehydrated, the fact that he did well is down to him being Jose Aldo, but still, it's not comfortable watching guys cut that much weight, when he looks like a completely different person. He rehydrated well and came in looking normal, but I think we're still allowed to be like, yeah, I'm not sure you should be doing that. It's like when McGregor was at 145. We were going, yeah, he's the best 145er in the world, but it's still very uncomfortable watching him cut all that weight. So that's those two done. Matt Brown versus Ben Saunders was pretty good. A couple of old boys going at it. Ben Saunders using his rubber guard well because that's Ben Saunders' deal. Used it to tie up, and he had like a reverse triangle at one point, and it wasn't like the working reverse triangle. It was the sort of hold and try and switch reverse triangle, trying to land elbows from the bottom. And Matt Brown managed to use the one-armed man, where you pass the arm under the back and hold it across the back. Couldn't really hit because he was in a triangle, but he did manage to stall out the triangle nicely. Saunders went to like a double wrist control and tried to use that thing that both Rafael Lovato and Dylan Dennis used, with one foot, like one ankle hooked behind the head and the knee across. Didn't really work. Set up and look for a single, but got smashed back to guard. Most of this fight was just Matt Brown trying to strip away controls and sit in the guard, drive to half guard, things like that. When they're on the feet, Brown would close off the kicks. Saunders would throw up a kick. Brown would try and close with an elbow or a left hook or something like that. Did a really good job with that. The sweeps were beautiful. Matt Brown, just brilliant at working in the clinch, striking in the clinch, and then he'll turn the opponent and block the foot so that they can't step. It's a Sasai Surikomiyashi in judo. I'm not sure what the Thai name is, but you see it all the time in Muay Thai. And you only see Matt Brown doing it in MMA. But he hit a sweep, entered the guard with a big elbow, gets the stoppage. It reminded me a little bit of the end of Machida versus Thiago Silva. Sweep, dive into the guard with a punch or an elbow, get the stoppage. Ian Heinisch versus Amari Akhmedov was a shite fight, but I love Ian Heinisch because Ian Heinisch has mastered the art of getting up and making grappling worthless, but it serves to the end that his striking isn't very good. He could stand up from underneath anyone and then lose the stand-up. Really bad, just throwing low kicks, getting counted every time. But then you got some of that Heinisch gold dust. When someone takes him down, like he got taken down into half guard, I think, in the first round, he immediately starts standing up, freeing his bottom leg, hitting a stand-up, turning his back while he does it, which is the big thing that's the threat. That's why you don't see everyone just stand up immediately. Turns his back. The guy Akhmedov gets the back body lock, and Heinisch immediately throws himself into a Granby and then gets out. And he's done that to Derek Brunson. He did that to Shoeface. He can do it to anyone, but he does nothing useful on the feet. It was so frustrating. And he was hitting beautiful switches too. Anytime he can get up to his feet and give up that back body lock again, he'll just throw out the switch behind him. Nunes did that against Jermaine Durandamy when she gave up a bad position at one point. Just lovely stuff. Aldana versus Viera. I liked Ketlin Viera coming into this. I liked Irene Aldana, actually, or Irene Aldana. But I thought Viera looked really quite strange. She didn't really go for her takedowns or anything because I've watched her ragdoll people before. But Aldana's interesting because everyone is like textbook striker, absolutely perfect. That's who you watch. But she really isn't. Like, she's very square, and so she doesn't really jab much. She throws the right straight a lot. Use the right straight to the body. So I'm going to marry her. That's the solution there. I love that right straight to the body. And it was setting up right straights and overhands to the head. But because she was so square, she was getting clipped by check left hooks on the entries and got wobbled by one. But then she came in and Viera went to parry with her right hand and throw the left hook with her left. And Aldana hit her with a left hook while she did it and knocked her out. It was beautiful. But I think the thing is that Aldana is so square when you watch her fight. She is a sucker for the left hook in her own right. But I really enjoyed it, and she used a nice inside low kick when Viera tried to step in with an overhand too. Broke her balance. Inside low kicks, coming back, love them. Chase Hooper versus David Tamer was good fun. And you saw Chase Hooper had one hook in along the fence, and Tamer was pressed to the fence trying to stop him putting in the other hook around his back. And he did what Jacare did in a couple of his fights in Strikeforce, which I absolutely loved, but also looks like havoc on your own shoulders. He took the foot that he couldn't get the hook in with, and he put it on the fence, like up by shoulder height, and he pushed himself off the fence like he was E Honda, just through the air, threw himself onto the mat, onto his shoulder, which is just asking to hurt yourself, but also just dope. Managed to get the hook in and finish. Well, no, there was a good amount of face cranking and Tamer muscling his way out of a rear naked choke and stuff, and then it was a mounted triangle with elbows that finished. And I love the mounted triangle with elbows. I remember seeing that in one of the very early Gracie Challenge videos. But it's so good because you're under the opponent's neck, You got their head off the floor. They can't really bridge, and because you're not on their hips, they can't do anything with their bridge, even if they do bridge. So they're just stuck under you with you punching them in the face. It's an amazing position because even if you can't finish the choke, the other guy's stuck. Oh, another thing I saw Chase Hooper doing, which I liked, was what a lot of judo guys did when they started coming to MMA, and Sambo guys. Fedor did this. TK, the legendary TK guard that was responsible for almost no submissions, but instead of trying to grab wrists, you use your forearm to turn the opponent's forearm so it's flat on your chest and pull it into your chest. But just clamp the forearm to your, flat to your chest, not the blade side. And that makes it very hard for the opponent to take their hands away. It's basically how you hold your opponent's hand to you without actually holding their hand. Go watch Fedor armbarring some fuckers, because he did it all the time. Perry versus Neal. Lovely cross counter from Perry over the top of the left straight, because the left straight gave him a lot of trouble against Danny, was it Richards? One of them. But a beautiful high kick out of nowhere from Neal sends him stumbling and he finishes him. And yeah, that was about it. That was all the stuff I enjoyed from that card. I think Petr Yan versus Marlon Moraes next, please. Possibly for the interim title. I mean, that does sort of put Aljamain Sterling in a shitty spot, because he's about equal. Well, no, I suppose he hasn't fought as... whatevs. Just move that belt on, because he can't have Cejudo sitting out forever. So let's do a quick question, and then we'll get out of here for today. Hello, Jackie Slacky. I've been grappling for a little less than a year now, and only recently discovered the joys of Kezakatame. However, it seems like this position rarely comes up in MMA grappling. Why do you think this is the case? Cheers from Toronto, David. Kezakatame, for folks who don't know, is the scarf hold. And there's a couple of variations of it. The traditional scarf hold is the one that you'll see in judo. That's so you're side control, but your hips are turned towards the opponent's head. So you're almost like sitting out on the side, and you've wrapped the head, and then you normally have the arm by it's often the gi sleeve, but sometimes the tricep. And most good guys, it's a balance between putting the weight on the opponent and giving them too much weight. So if you're under a really good judo player, it fucking sucks, because in jiu-jitsu you're all like, well, you don't wrap the head because I'll just bridge and pop out the back door. But then you meet someone who's actually got a background in judo, and they're like, no, you're fucking not. The one that I always reference is Remco Pardo knocking out some dude. Oh, that might not have been scarf hold actually, but by holding the elbow, when it looked like the guy could pop out on his back, he just starts elbowing down on his head. That's one of the early UFCs. But I think Kezakatame is one of those things that you just haven't seen, or you don't often see weaponized very well in a very BJJ-centric sport at the moment. Well, both MMA and no-gi grappling. Fionn Davis, I've seen use it from time to time. She's a judoka who's doing really well in the no-gi grappling scene. And then, of course, the things like the chest compressor, the Josh Barnett versus Dean Lister one, that is an application of a scarf hold. Basically, the differences are where your arms are under their arms and where their elbows are. And of course, you've got the reverse Keza and things like that, which is basically reverse Keza is a lot more popular in jiu-jitsu and MMA because it works you towards the mount, whereas the traditional Kezakatame points you away from the mount. So you've got some work to do if you want to mount, and the mount is obviously a huge deal in jiu-jitsu and MMA. You do see the Kezakatame quite a lot in women's MMA, and I think this is where I'm gonna go against everything I've ever done before and praise the head and arm throw. But the head and arm throw lands you in the Kezakatame, which is part of why it's such a big deal in judo. And you don't tend to see dudes, or certainly in men's MMA, you don't tend to see guys get submitted with that leg Americana, or the udigurami, whatever they call it in judo, where you push the arm down, catch it with the knee that's closest, the leg that's closest to them over the wrist, and then you pull it back towards you so that your hip is Americanaing them. You don't tend to see that so much in men's MMA, but I've seen it quite a lot in women's MMA, even in the UFC. Felice Herrig submitted some lass with it a little while ago. And I watched some lasses do it in 1-2. I think one of the things about the Kezakatame that certainly a lot of fighters probably don't like is that it's quite difficult to strike effectively from there, because if you want to keep the head wrapped, then you can free arm for those short headlock punches, like in pro wrestling. And if you try and grip the elbow with the hand that was doing the punching and try and free the other one to punch, you can't really do much because you're the opponent's basically under your armpit. What you'll see a lot more is like the modified Kezukatami, which is with the underhook. And I quite like that. If you ever do like bag work on the mat, on the ground drills, that's the sort of like the favorite side control position, because you can, it's the one that Salo Hibiro and Sanjay Hibiro teach to hold side control. You keep the opponent pinched between your elbow and your hip, and you turn towards their head, and then you've got the left arm. Sorry, if they're on your right side, you've got the left arm free to punch. So the modified Keza I quite like, especially because you've got the underhook and you can turn into them and start working for the more traditional side control attacks. Obviously, Ronda Rousey was great from Kezukatami. I'm going to have to go back and watch some of her fights now, because obviously she always threw into Kezukatami and then always managed to transition into the armbar. One of the ones I like from Kezukatami is this is my answer to using Kezukatami. If I end up there, I probably didn't want to be there and I want to move back into a more orthodox jiu-jitsu game. So one of the ones I do from Kezukatami is to walk my hips back into the opponents and turn them on their side, and then try and move into a leg drag position, and then you can move back into like a normal side control afterwards if you want. But I would say watch Ronda's fights. We all pretend she wasn't any good now, but she was very good at that. Cheers, David. Hijack, low jack, spitting back slack. I'm an amateur brackets prospective professional fighter who's been following your work since the Bloody Elbow fan post days, and as a result, you have more to do with my striking and how I think about fighting than anyone I've never met, and most of the guys I have been training with for years. What would you say to me requesting to put your quill in glove logo on my fight shorts? I can definitely understand you not wanting to come across as endorsing a fighter, and more importantly a person that you've never met or had any interaction with beyond the occasional comment reply, but you're a cool dude and it's a cool logo, and more than sponsors, I want my attire to be a shout out to the instructors and gyms that have got me to where I am. Oh, that's very sweet. Yours in pugilism, Kenyon. Oh, that's my boy Kenyon Stacey. He's hilarious on Facebook. He's always good for a pithy reply. Yes, if you're listening to this, anyone, if you want to wear the glove and the quill on your shorts, feel free. I don't know how to get them printed. I've never looked into it. I've always wanted to team up with someone like Scramble. I love Scramble. Scramble's probably my favorite. Well, I do like Newaza. Actually, there's a few good ones out there now. I've always wanted to team up with someone like that. And I think Scramble's British too. But team up with someone and do a Scramble X Slack or something like that. But never ever approached someone about it, because like most of my ideas, it's normally like a pipe dream, and then I go, it's a lot of work to look into. But yes, if you want to print the logo on your shorts, by all means do. It's an honor to have been, or to be perceived as helping someone out. All I do is spout shit about ideas and things that other people have taught me, and if that affects you, then, and if that helps you, then I'm really glad. Cheers, Kenyon. Keep fighting the good fight. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. We'll be back on Thursday, because we've got a couple of events coming. We've got people got pissy when I mentioned Josh Barnett, or how I'm genuinely excited to have Josh Barnett back. Fuck you. I am genuinely excited to have Josh Barnett back. He might lose. He's in against someone who he shouldn't lose to, but it's heavyweight and it's crazy, and he's been off for a while. But it's nice to have Josh Barnett back in the fight game. We've also got Ilima Leigh McFarlane fight of the weekend. And we've got this Edgar versus Korean Zombie card, which has, I think it's got Uzdemir on, it's got a couple of good things on. So we've got good stuff coming. If you want to support the podcast and read the extra studies and listen to the history episodes and things like that, sign up to the Patreon. Lets me do this podcast. And if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I've written at any time, including my articles at Unibet and my articles at Fight Primer, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Did you notice that Alexander Volkanovski went from 214 pounds to 240 pounds mid-broadcast, and then they just stuck with it? Cheers!